Over the years, Mitch McConnell, the legendary and long serving senator from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, has been tagged with many different nicknames, some private, because you really don't want them repeated in public, and some of them have become part of political lore. One of them, for example, given by the late Rush Limbaugh, dubbed the senior senator from Kentucky as the Turtle. Given McConnell's physical appearance, that nickname isn't too far off the mark. However, given recent events, Mitch McConnell's been tagged with a new nickname by a buddy of mine known as Smilin' Jack. Smilin' Jack refers to him as Mitch the Glitch, and given things that have been happening to him lately, that nickname isn't too far off the mark. Wonder what I'm talking about? Hang on, folks, we're going to get into all this in just 1 second. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. By now, everyone is fully aware of the incident at the U.S. Capitol last month where Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, came to the microphone with his fellow Republicans in tow to give comments about some of the things going on in the Congress. In the middle of his remarks, mid sentence, mid word no less, all of a sudden, McConnell froze. Simply, the next image that you saw was Mitch McConnell staring out into space, not uttering a word, not looking at anyone in particular, not looking at anything, not even sure what he might have been looking at. The pause went on so long that one of his aides had to help McConnell away from the microphone. He did return a few moments later to make some jokes about what happened, and then he left for the afternoon. A very scary incident, not only for McConnell personally, but for we as a nation, because regardless of what you think of him, he does hold a position in the government of the United States, and no one wants to see this happen to anybody. Unfortunately, we're now seeing it happen again. Let me take you to a headline from Breitbart.com. Mitch McConnell inexplicably freezes at podium again. Article written by Nick Gilbertson. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, inexplicably froze during a press gaggle on Wednesday in Covington, Kentucky, just over a month after a similar incident at the U.S. Capitol. Okay, that's the story. I want to set up what happened, and then I want to show you the video. It's the month of August, and members of the House and members of the Senate are out in their respective districts or states, attending various events, meeting people, shaking hands, that sort of thing. So McConnell is invited to the Northern Chamber of Commerce event being held in Covington, Kentucky. He goes there for a luncheon, gives some remarks, and then there's a press availability later where he takes questions. Now, that sets up what you're about to see next. One of the TV stations that was there to cover the event was WLWT out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Given that Cincinnati is right across the river from Covington, you would sort of expect them to be there for this kind of event. Okay, that sets up what happens. Now, McConnell is giving remarks. He's answering questions that are being given to him by the press. And then we have the following happen. Listen to this.
Sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
yes.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
Okay, some thoughts about all of this. I don't want to see this happen to anybody. I don't care if I disagree with them politically, agree with them politically, like them politically, dislike them politically. I don't care if it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. I don't want to see this sort of thing happen to a friend, a family member, any human being on God's earth. It will happen to all of us eventually. Age and time are not friends of a human being. What happened to McConnell is going to happen to all of us at some point. But McConnell is a little bit different than most other people. If he were the average citizen, we would give him our sympathies. We would do what we could to try to help in whatever ways we can. But he's a member of the government of the United States. And this sort of thing, unfortunately, is not limited to McConnell these days. I could go on giving example of politician after politician currently in Congress or even the White House who are afflicted with these kind of ailments that come with the passing of time. And that sort of brings up a very interesting question. Is it time for the citizens of the United States to amend their Constitution to put in an age maximum limit for how old you're allowed to be to serve in Congress or be president? Now, I know that a fellow social media commentator, Christian Watson, has commented on this very thing, so I'll go ahead and give my own thoughts on the matter, which, by the way, if you're not watching Christian Watson, you need to be paying attention to his work. That young man is on the rise and is extraordinarily sharp. But let old Front Porch here tell you what he thinks about the matter. I think it's time to do it, for any number of reasons. Now, that sort of begs the question. There's no age maximum in the Constitution. There are age minimums. You have to be 25 to be able to serve in the House, 30 to serve in the Senate, and 35 to be President of the United States. But why did the Founding Fathers put those in? Well, there's not a lot of how do I want to say this? There's not a lot of commentary from the Founding Fathers, but we do have some ideas. Let me take you to a website, constitutionalcenter.org, and I'll read you from part of an article that they'd written back in 2016. At the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, there was little public debate about the age requirements and no discussion about the age requirement for the presidency. One discussion of note, however, involved two important founders, James Wilson of Pennsylvania, a future Supreme Court justice, and George Mason of Virginia, ultimately a constitutional dissenter. Mason, who was 62 years of age, argued that a requirement of 25 years of age was needed for the House because of his own experience. Mason said, quote, "If interrogated, he would be obligated to declare that his political opinions at the age of 21 were too crude and erroneous to merit an influence on public measures." Now, regardless of what you think of Mason, that's an almost humorous and pretty honest take. In other words, look, I'm so silly at 21 years old, I obviously don't have the political maturity to be making decisions that affect everybody else's life, so definitely we ought to have an age minimum. Now, on the other side of that argument was James Wilson of Pennsylvania, who at the time was 45 years of age, said that any age limit on serving in public office would, quote, damp the efforts of genius and of laudable ambition. There was no more reason for incapacitating youth than age, where the requisite qualifications were found. Wilson pointed to William Pitt the Younger, who served as British Prime Minister at the age of 24, and Lord Bolingbroke, who served in Parliament in his early 20s. In the end, however, Mason won the argument, and the drafting committee approved age limits by a 7-3 vote. There was some insight later from James Madison, writing in Federalist No. 62, as to why senators needed to be older than House members. Madison talked about the need for senatorial trust, which he required, quote, greater context of information and stability of character, that the senator should have reached a period of life most likely to supply these advantages. Madison also discussed some points that some scholars believe led to the age requirements: a distrust of foreign influence, and a fear of families trying to put children in place in federal office to serve in a hereditary manner. Madison feared the, quote, indiscriminate and hasty admission of people to the Congress that might channel for foreign influence on the national councils. Well, let me tell you this. If Madison was worried about foreign influence on the Congress, he really ought to see things these days. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Shame on me. Joking aside, you see where I'm going with this. Very little discussion about why the age minimums were put there, but they didn't really need to say a whole lot because there was a general understanding. If you're going to be making decisions that affect the lives of, at the time, hundreds of thousands of people who were citizens of the new United States, then it was understood that you should have achieved a certain level of maturity, politically or otherwise, and have also reached a certain station in life and have done and lived certain things, so that if you are going to be part of passing laws that affects everyone, you should understand what the impacts of those laws will be based on your own personal, already achieved experience. Hence, the reason that the minimums were put in, along with some other things, but I'll get to those later. Now, they didn't put in a maximum, which sort of begs the question why. Two reasons that I can immediately think of. Number one, life expectancy in the 18th century was considerably shorter than it is currently. And number two, the founding fathers never envisioned being a member of the House or being in the Senate as some kind of lifelong career. They envisioned that people would serve for a few terms in the House, maybe a couple of 3 terms in the Senate, and then they would retire back to their professions or their farms or what have you. Go back to living normal lives, not congressional pillars, not just the ones in the actual building. So, hence no age maximums. But given what's happened with McConnell and given what's happened with various other politicians currently serving in the Congress of the United States, and given the current occupant of the White House, perhaps it is time that we consider a serious discussion about whether there should be age maximums on how old you're allowed to be when serving in the House, the Senate, or the presidency. Now, lest you think that I'm taking advantage of poor Mitch McConnell's situation that he finds himself in today, let me give you some things to think about. Consider the following. Regardless of what you think of Joe Biden, personally or politically, there's one fact about him that is indisputable. He's currently 80 years old. He'll be 81 on his birthday later this year. If he runs for re-election next year and if he wins, when he takes the oath of office in January 2025, he will be 82 years old. And again, regardless of what you think of Biden politically or personally, his physical and mental issues are becoming painfully obvious to anyone who's watching him, regardless of your politics, regardless of anything else. This man is having trouble performing the duties of his office. Now, lest you think that I'm being partisan in my attack, hey, I'll flip that around. Donald Trump is 77 years old. If he seeks his party's nomination, which he is, and if he gets it, which it looks like he's going to, he will be 78 years old at the time of the election in November 2024. That is how old he will be when he is sworn in January 25. Do you really want a man in a similar age range as Biden to have his hands on the levers of power? God forbid something happen, and if it does, what do you do? Now, why stop with the presidency? Let's take it one step further. This is a picture of Dianne Feinstein. It is not her current picture, and I do not say that to be unkind. If you have seen recent images of the senior senator from California, you'll know that the time has caught up with her in a very bad way. She is currently 89 years old, 7 months, 24 days. Take it one step further, and just to prove that I'm not a sexist, here's Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa. 89 years, 4 months, 29 days old. Next up on the list, the legendary Bernie Sanders of Vermont. 81 years, 5 months, 7 days old. McConnell is 80 and will be 81 in a few days. Jim Risch, Republican from Idaho. 79 years, 9 months, 12 days, and on it goes. These are just their ages. I could sit here and discuss John Fetterman, who's a relatively young man, but is obviously having physical difficulties in his job. Maybe not old enough to be maxed out at a age constitutional limit, but you get my point. These things are becoming more and more obvious every day, with news stories after news stories being printed about the individuals who are running the federal government. Elected officers, I should say. Maybe it's time we consider a constitutional amendment to start taking care of these issues. What would it look like? Well, you have to be 25 to be in the House, 35 in the Senate, 30 to be in the Senate, 35 to be president. Maybe we go 60 is the maximum age on the House, 65 on the Senate, 70 on the presidency, or something in reverse like that. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of things to figure out, but I think it's starting to reach the point we've got to seriously discuss this. Look, we're watching this, but don't think we're alone in watching this. There are people all over the world, friends and enemies, who are seeing the decrepity of our federal government. And let's be honest, given the current age and frailties and infirmities of the people who hold power in Washington, do we really want a situation where, bless their heart, they might be very well intentioned, but if they're not able to fulfill the duties that they are elected to, do we want them being there, making decisions that affect us domestically and internationally? It's one thing to look old. It's another thing to be old. Maybe it's time we start thinking about what we need to do to better this situation. But that's what I think. What do you think? As we start to wrap up this video, please do me some favors as always. Number one, if you're not a subscriber to this channel, please do so. Number two, please leave a comment below. You wouldn't believe how much that sort of thing helps a relatively new content creator like me. Number three, hit the bell for notifications. I want to make sure you're always aware when new videos and live streams are coming out. Number four, share the video around. And number five, give me a thumbs up. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your Front Porch Conservative, and I'll see you next time.